Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and a video I did earlier kind of gave me a thought of something that people oftentimes don't ask themselves closely enough. I did the video earlier saying that not everyone needs to do eccentric reps on all of their exercises to reach their goals, sometimes even to reach maximum size. If there's more than one pathway to do things, particularly like gaining muscle mass, but there are different performance elements that are addressed by different types of training that carry over into other activities. And I think that's an important thing to consider here. Most people who lift weights do want to gain muscle, most men at least. That is usually one of their highest priorities. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing. I'll do a little bit of crafting. Let's talk about that further, because it becomes more interesting when we start talking about things beyond just gaining muscle, because a lot of people actually want more out of their training than just gaining muscle. Some people do actual activities outside of the gym. Some people play different sports. And some things could just be amateur level things that people don't think about. A lot of people are like, well, yeah, I play tennis, I play golf, or I do a little bit of martial arts. But then you have to look at them and go, you do realize that your training in the gym can positively affect those other things you do more based upon what you do in the gym. And that makes them stop to think for a minute. And sometimes those other things can interfere with each other in terms of recovery. So that's things that you need to address sometimes. For example, you tell me you do martial arts, you do a lot of striking. They do a lot of striking. The first thing you would tell them, well, instead of just focusing exclusively on all your hypertrophy work in the gym, why aren't you doing any speed strength work? Why aren't you doing any dynamic work? Why aren't you doing explosive full body lifts? Push presses, power cleans, things like that would help you enormously with being faster and delivering more power on those other things. They won't teach you how to punch, they won't teach you how to kick, but if you're somebody who already knows how to punch and you know how to kick, the ability to recruit muscle fibers faster, turn motor units on faster, are going to deliver more speed at the end of that punch or that kick. That's a proven sports science thing. That's known. That is not even subject to debate in the sports science world. You can train that element in the gym with your lifting. So the things you're doing for gains, the way that you go about doing it could carry over to that other thing. Or people don't factor in little bitty things, such as they say, okay, well, I train because I want to get more muscle, more aesthetic. I want bigger arms, though. But you would step back and ask them, okay, so you want bigger arms. That's a top priority right now. Outside of the guys who use enormous amounts of steroids or who are injecting stuff directly in their arms, most of the guys you know who have big arms, any drug-free guys, particularly older guys, what do a lot of them have in common? How many of them sit around just doing endless amounts of curls all day, and how many of them are actually strong on big compounds and do some curls? Majority is the latter. But you'll see a lot of guys who come in and they state their goal is to get big arms, but they don't really think about how to really train for that, and they don't think about the other aspects of it. They get so fixated on that one little thing that they don't factor in that it's actually very, very difficult to make smaller muscles on your body grow without getting bigger muscles to grow as well. That's something that's always been noted. Even bodybuilders and magazine writers noted that decades ago. Guys who end up gaining large amounts of muscle across their whole body doing a lot of heavy work or big compound movements, their arms and stuff tend to grow anyways. In fact, they oftentimes grow faster by getting good on weighted chin-ups and barbell rows in the bench press, and then adding in a little bit of isolation work. Those guys end up getting bigger arms faster than the guys who come in and do 6 different types of curls. I'll go so far as to say that as far as older guys I've met who've been training for decades, all the guys I've known who had really big arms, who trained drug-free, were all really strong on their pulling and pressing movements, and they did a little bit of curls. One of the guys I know who had enormous arms naturally, one of the biggest natural arms I've ever seen in an older guy. Guy did a lot of chin-ups. He was really strong on barbell rows, lots of presses. He did no tricep isolation work, and the only type of curls he did was just curls with a straight bar with an Olympic bar. That's what he did. He didn't sit around doing 6 types of curls. So oftentimes guys don't think through, wait a minute, are there other things entailed with my goal other than just me looking at that one aspect of it? They'll look at that one thing of I really need my arms to get a lot bigger, so they focus on all of that instead of going, well, maybe my arms aren't disproportionate, and if I focus on just making my whole upper body bigger, my arms will probably grow with it, and particularly if I focus on the exercises that use the arms as primary movers. When you really think about it, getting really strong on weighted chin-ups. You ever seen anybody who's strong on full range of motion weighted chin-ups who had small biceps? Whether they did curls or not wasn't fully irrelevant there. Some did, some didn't. I've never seen a guy with small biceps who's really strong on weighted chin-ups. Never seen a guy with small triceps who was really strong on weighted dips or closed grip bench presses. These things tend to go hand in hand. Big, heavy compounds that put a large focus on that smaller muscle you want oftentimes end up putting more overall size on it than just focusing on just hammering away at that muscle. I'm not saying you shouldn't add some isolation movements in. If you have a muscle that you think is out of proportion, the last thing you want to do is skip isolating it. But you need to look at the bigger picture with your training. I mean, these are important things that people don't often think about, and they're just little simple things. They're not that complicated. It's not that complicated to step back and say, hey, if I want to get more speed strength to punch faster, I should probably train for that in the gym. It's not rocket science to figure that out, but people just sometimes don't think of these things. They don't think of them at all. Or they don't step back and think, man, I mean, I'm trying to get my arms to grow, and I don't know. They're not growing fast enough without realizing they have no back either. Maybe if they got really strong on weighted chin-ups and just picked one type of curl to really focus on and really focus on improving on that type of curl and getting really strong on those weighted chin-ups, that their whole body would start getting more proportionate. That back development would lead to more bicep development. And of course, and the curls added to it is just icing on the cake. But, you know, again, people don't always think of these things. Or they don't sometimes think about the fact that goals can contradict each other. And sometimes you've got to balance these things out. You know, everyone wants everything all at once, and they don't realize and think about the fact that sometimes things have to come in phases. Now, sometimes you can try to achieve multiple goals at once, but by doing so, it can sometimes take a lot longer to reach those goals. And that's just the unfortunate nature of things. You know, a lot of guys are like, well, I want to get to my natural limit or close to as big as I can get drug-free, but then they want to keep abs year-round. Kind of difficult to do. Some guys can genetically do it, and the guys who can, hey, they're gifted, fantastic. But those goals are contradicting each other. It might be doable, but you're also adding several more years to your time frame to do it. You're probably going to have to overeat a little bit and gain a little bit of fat. You don't need to get fat. You're going to have to gain a little bit of fat to gain large amounts of muscle, though, unless trenbolone and growth hormone and stuff start coming into the equation. So people need to realize that sometimes different goals that they have require different phases, or they can contradict each other. And, you know, those things require a little more planning. Or people have different things they really want to focus on. You know, a lot of people are like, well, I'm really trying to get big and strong, but I also want to go do this other type of thing also. I want to run a marathon. Well, sometimes you're going to have to spend phases to where you don't worry about getting any bigger and stronger, just maintaining what you have to go focus on that marathon. And you know what? That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. And that's the other thing. There's nothing wrong with changing your goals as you go. And that's something a lot of guys also struggle with, of looking at the fact of, is this goal that I'm working towards, is it going to make me happy? Are the things that I'm going to have to do to get there going to make me happy? Is it the type of training I'm going to have to do to reach that goal, does that make me happy? Is it fulfilling to me? Because at the end of the day, we all train for reasons. We all train for different reasons, whether they're health reasons, our personal ego reasons. Some of us like to train just to let off steam. But you know what? That can be a contradiction in your goals too, because someone says, I train because I have a lot of stress, I have a lot of anger issues. My training is therapeutic for me, so therefore I train a lot. And sometimes they train more than they can recover from. Sometimes they cut into their maximum recoverable volume, and it does interfere with their goal of getting as big as they want to get either. So again, goals can contradict each other, and sometimes you have to accept those things and assess those things for yourself and decide what you really want, what's going to make you happier. But again, watch for those conflicts, though, because they're going to be there sometimes. If a guy says, I need to train for an hour every single day, weightlifting, high volume, high intensity, because it's my therapy, but I also want to get really big. Again, using it for the therapeutic purposes might slow down your ability to get big at the rate that you want it to. It might not. Depends on how much you're training. If you're pushing yourself too hard all the time. If it makes you prone to injuries because you're there to let off steam and aggression. Sometimes that ends up getting you hurt. That's going to interfere with the other. But you know what? At the end of the day, I would tell people, ultimately with something like that, you know what? If you're training for therapeutic reasons, to let off steam, to let off aggression, because of whatever anger issues or emotional issues or whatever you have, I would say that's a positive thing. That should probably take priority over your gaining size. And I would say for that person, you're going to be a lot happier from the therapeutic aspects of your training than purely the size. So what if you grow a little slower from doing that? As long as you're not getting hurt or injured, I'd say that outweighs it, because ultimately everything that we do with training is to make us happy. Whether it's just to make us feel healthy or feel better, or to let off steam as therapy, or because we have some ego-driven performance goal or aesthetic goal, it's there to make us happy. And you know, again, if you've got anger issues, having a positive way to let that anger out, that can improve your quality of life right there. So that would actually be, in my opinion, one of the most worthwhile reasons to train that I can possibly think of. So for the people who do it that way, as long as you accept the fact that you might push yourself harder than you need to sometimes as a result of that, it might even interfere with your gains, but so what? You're going to be happier for it. So who really cares at the end of the day? And that's the other thing too that it comes down to. You know, a lot of people want to argue about what they enjoy doing versus a goal. And I would say that people who are dead set and focused upon a goal for a competitive reason have to really step back and say, the way that I train, what's going to make me happy and what I find enjoyable in the gym really needs to take a back seat to a competitive endeavor. But assuming that competitive endeavor is going to make you happy, may not. Whereas in the guys who are just training for general health, training for fitness, but they're not competitive in anything, sometimes they've got to step back and train in a way that's not really that great, not really that ideal. Ways that I would laugh at and say aren't that effective. But you know what? If it makes them happy and they enjoy doing it, then who cares? Because ultimately we train to make ourselves happy, to improve our life in some ways. And if it makes you happy and training in the way that would maybe help you reach your goal faster doesn't make you happy, then I would say go for what makes you happy, because your goal's probably not that important to you anyways in that case. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. It's just about personal joy. But that's always the thing. You need to train in a way that's going to help you reach whatever goals that you have while trying to minimize the contradictions in your goals. But always make sure that you've really thought through what those goals are, why you train, and if the way that you're training is actually going to fulfill most of those goals and the priorities you have them most effectively. But generally speaking, it's all about happiness at the end of the day and fulfillment and what improves your life ultimately. So make sure whatever you're doing in the gym ultimately makes you feel better about your life in some way and better about yourself in some way. Because if it doesn't do that, then you're probably wasting your time. And it's time to step back, reassess completely what you're doing, and ask yourself what you're doing with your training and with your life. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.